Hey guys, welcome to another tutorial where we walk you through how to use the Canon M200 as a webcam, but this is part two. If you haven't watched part one yet, go back. There's a link below or there's something on the screen here. Go back, watch part one to make sure that all the technical settings are dialed in and your camera is functioning properly as a webcam to use it with a computer. If you already watched that, let's continue this part two video. We've already done the settings in a previous video, but we're going to review everything in this video that's going to make the image really pop. So when I say really pop, you can see how right now what we're seeing in this view of me, I'm using as a webcam, the same camera, same lens, and we have a really beautiful background, really sharp features in the front, and the lighting is looking pretty good. Junaid also has similar settings, and we're going to show you how to do something similar for yourself. Now, let's get into it. We're going to go through just the menus that we see on the screen here. Now, if you're not seeing this same menu layout on your camera, then you want to go back to the previous tutorial and follow the instructions, and you should see something similar. On the top left, you can see that there's that video camera icon with an M next to it. We set that up in the previous setting. So let's go through these one by one, and there's just three main things you want to think about. You got aperture, you got shutter speed, and you have ISO. Now, those are the three primary things. After that, we're going to cover white balance and color profiles. But if you understand those three things, the relationship between ISO, aperture, and shutter speed, then everything else becomes a lot simpler. So first of all, this is only going to be available if you're in manual mode. So if on the top left corner of your LCD, you're not seeing that camera icon with the M icon next to it, then go back and you want to get that fixed. Junaid, which one do you want to hit first? Which one do you go to first? What's your...
So the first one that I like to do is set up the shutter speed. So right now we see 1/50 in the video, and then this is an f2 lens. It's not the same lens as the one that the other devices are using. And then you have the exposure setting, and then the ISO is set to auto right now. So let's begin with the shutter speed. Now, you'll notice that this image looks a little bit different because we are looking at an LCD from another camera. So you're going to get better results on what you're looking at on your camera as opposed to what the camera sees right now.
Okay, so that's a touch screen, right? So you can just tap the different buttons that you see there.
Absolutely.
And then adjust it. Now, I want you to notice this. You see that kind of rainbow-shaped yellow bar next to the 1/50 on the bottom left corner. What that means is that that number is manipulated by spinning the little wheel that is wrapped around the shutter button on your camera. So why don't you go ahead and, yeah, there we go. See, it says 150, 180. What that number represents is the fraction of a second that it takes for one exposure. So if we have it really low, then that means that we're absorbing more light. So that's good for low light situations. But it also means, like, just move your hand in front of the camera. Let's see what happens. You see how everything is so blurred? It's because while the shutter is open, whatever moves becomes a blur. So we want a good balance between, we don't want it to look blurry, but we also want to capture as much light as possible. And here's the rule of thumb. When it comes to cinema movies, almost without fail, with traditional cinema, you take the amount of frames per second, which in this case is 30, because we're using NTSC, and we double it. So if you just want the shortcut, go to 1/60th, okay?
Yes,
but
go to 1/60th.
The theory behind this, yes, 1/60th is great. But the theory behind this is that you want there to be half a blur between each exposure. So if something is moving across the screen, then you don't want one blur to overlap with another blur. You want there to be the same amount of space across the screen between one frame and the next, even if it's blurred. So I hope that I didn't confuse you with that, but go for 1/60th. Now, the next one over, it says f2.0. Could you tap that button for me? So if we touch this, then now we're controlling the f-stop. I think the simplest way to describe what f is, another word people use is aperture, or some people call it the t-stop. If you're using cinema cameras, it's the t-stop, which is a bit more accurate than f-stop. But this controls how big what's called an aperture, the hole that lets light in. There you go. How large the opening is that lets light in. So the lower the number, the more light gets let in. And the higher the number, the less light gets in. So we want the number as low as your lens will allow in this case. Now, the camera that is the lens that's attached to this camera, the lowest is f2.0. The one that comes with your Goboxstudio is going to be f1.4 in most cases, depending on the options you chose. But that's our standard model. And the lower it is, the more soft the background will be compared to your face. And the reason why my face looks so sharp in a lot of cases is because your brain is contrasting it with how soft the background is, and even like the fringes of my face. So f1.4, if you can go that low, and f2 is also a great option.
Yeah, so f2 is the limit, is the lowest that this specific lens can do. That's why we see f2 on here. But the lens that we have in the other cameras, you might have the f1.4 option.
Yes. Now, the other thing I said that's really important to understand is frame rate, but we've already taken care of that in the previous one. And if you haven't, then if you know you're in NTSC mode, it's going to be 30 frames per second, or 29.97 more accurately. If you're in PAL mode, it's going to be 25% frames per second. And you don't have to worry about all the other ones for now, but they're both going to look great on social media or on edited video. I'm seeing on the bottom right, it says auto, but I can't really see what the little icon next to it says. It's a little bit blurred. Can you tell me what that is?
So that one is the ISO.
The ISO. Okay. So I couldn't see where it said ISO on it. So think of ISO like turning the brightness on your TV screen higher or lower. So if it's really high and you're trying to watch like a dramatic movie that's shot in the dark, like Batman, then when you turn it up, what happens is everything starts looking a little washed out and maybe even grainy, right? So even though you might be able to see more detail, sometimes you want more detail. You see more detail than you want. And then the parts that are really bright get washed out, like you're seeing in this image right here. The brighter parts just look too bright.
Right.
So we suggest that you keep it in auto. And here's the reason. Professionals will usually lock it down. But what they're going to do is they're going to spend hours working on getting the lighting just right, and all the reflectors, and even like the level of makeup you have on people's faces. And they have spray that goes on your clothes that makes it look less or more bright. And when you get it all dialed in, and I know this because I've been in a lot of movie sets, then keeping it manual is perfect. But let's say I'm going to show up. I don't know what color shirt I'm going to be wearing necessarily. If I was wearing a black shirt, the ISO settings would be different. If a little bit more sun comes in through the window, my face could get blown out. So I keep mine on auto. I suggest you keep yours on auto as well.
Yes, base mid with no externalized base coming in except the ones that I allow. Now ISO is also the sensitivity of the sensor. So the higher ISO will start introducing, just like you said, you're turning up the brightness, it's going to start introducing noise in your image as well. So if you are in a very bright setting, the auto ISO is going to do great, and it's going to go down to ISO 100. And when that's happening, you'll see that your image is still blown away because there's so much light coming in. So either you want to cut the light down or play with some of the other settings in here. For example, we can change the shutter speed that's set to 160 right now to control the lighting. So, and we can actually mimic that in this setup. So for example, the ISO is at auto right now, but if I were to bring it up to be 6400 or 2000, you can see that the image is completely blown away. What I'll do is I'll go back to here and I'll change the shutter speed. So let's move that over. And as I increase the shutter speed, the shutter is moving faster, and now it's letting less light to come through. And you can see a lot better image.
So this is all very possible. You can do this, but one thing you got to remember is the higher the ISO, the lower the image quality is. The lower the ISO, the more clean and creamy your images will be. So you want it to be as low as you can, and 100 is the lowest they go on standard cameras. And you'll see here it's totally black at 100 because the shutter speed is so darn fast right now. So we're going to get this back to our defaults. I think, Junaid, in your setup, because you have a completely controlled environment and you understand the technical stuff behind this, do you keep your regular webcam on auto, or do you have it set to a certain number?
I actually have my webcam set to specific ISO and specific f-stop because I want the image to
It's
be
locked down.
always it's
Yeah.
locked down. Yeah,
And you have complete control of how much light comes in and from where,
correct.
right? And what clothes you're wearing. Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. For me, I keep mine on auto, even though because right now, by the way, it's 8:30 in the morning and the sun's
Hmm.
not quite out yet. I've got a window to my left. And around the middle of the day, the sun hits the window and I get completely blown out. So that's when I was just like, I know I could get my image a little bit better if I were
Hmm.
to continue tweaking it every day, but I don't want to do that. I just want to keep it in auto mode. And I know with the Goboxstudio, you guys want to go to exciting places, shoot with,
Hmm.
in your hotel, on the beach, at the airport, where, on the stage. And there's so many variables that I recommend keeping in an automatic mode. If you have a controlled environment, then you do you. Figure out what works best. Let's go to the last two things I want to look at. And we can't access it from here, I don't think. But I want to look at how to deal with white balance and color profiles. And we touched on that in the previous one, and I said we'd follow up. So that's what I'm going to do. And then we're going to talk about using ND filters, and that's a bit more advanced. Okay, so AWB, that stands for automatic white balance.
Hmm.
Now, what is white balance? It's basically getting the colors on your screen to look like how your eye sees it. That's what it means. And pretty much there's a range. You have cool tones, that means bluish tones, and then you have warm tones, which is yellowish tones. So what we want to do is get the camera to show your face in a natural skin tone. And believe it or not, our eyes do this very, very well automatically, but sometimes we have to tell the camera what to look for. Now, I usually keep things in auto white balance mode, and 90% of the time, my skin tones are going to look just fine. However, sometimes you're in places like an office building where they have fluorescent lights and they're all very, very cold or cool. And then your skin starts looking all pasty and pale and no color in them. And that's when you want to do things to warm things up. So can you show us how to adjust the white balance manually?
Absolutely. So the first thing you want to do is you want to press this Q button over here, and it's going to bring up this array of menu on the LCD screen. Now I've selected AWB, and it has the ability to go between auto white balance with white priority for when you have under tungsten lighting, or you just want auto white balance where the
So what does
ambient
tungsten
colors.
lighting mean for anybody who may not know what that is?
So tungsten lighting is something that the more yellow light or the Kelvin is at a lower number as opposed to a higher number, and we'll see that when
So
we.
just think like Edison bulb. That's like that
Correct.
tungsten is a type of metal that's in the filament. That's why they call it tungsten lighting.
Correct.
And then the opposite is going to be fluorescent lights, right? Like what you
Yes.
see in office buildings. Let's just run through these and go all the way from the left. Auto white balance, and we have sunlight, right? Oh, no, is that sunlight or is that tungsten?
Daylight.
That's daylight. All right. So
Hmm.
that's daylight settings. So you can pick the one from here, and it's gonna get you 99% there. If you're in daylight, if you're outside but in the shade, if it's an overcast, there's that next one there, and then the next one over is tungsten, right? And that just means like an Edison bulb. Just think of the old-fashioned bulbs that I can't believe we're saying old-fashioned. I feel so old.
I know tungsten. Well, what's cool is that you'll see that the scene also changed, and you can see a lot more blue. So because
Yeah.
the tungsten lighting has a lot more yellow, you'll see the scene. Like I have full daylight white lights in here, so it's adding a little blue hue when I choose the tungsten. And then you
All
have
right. Then we
white
have
fluorescent lighting.
all right, and
Then you have
then there's
flash
now
for
that's
flash
for the built-in
photography.
flash, right? For
Mm-hmm.
which typically is going to be pure white, I believe.
Yes, mostly pure white. Then you have the custom coloring, and this is when you can load up a custom setting. And I think you
Well,
probably use some of
let's
that
talk
too.
about this. Like for anybody with the Goboxstudio, then you could look at the back of the light, and it's going to show you what temperature the light is set to. I think when it's default, we set it to 4,800,
Yeah.
and that's going to be a tiny bit warm. That means a little bit yellowish because that brings out skin tones better. But if the light is set to 4,800, then you want to set the camera to 4,800. Now, 5,200 is a tiny bit on the cool side because I know that Junaid, in your studio, you have mostly cool lights, right? Very
Mm-hmm.
white.
Yes.
So he's matched his camera to his studio settings. So when you get advanced, you could play with this and get really fancy and try to get like a unique look. But for now, you can use the presets across that bottom bar or just set it to auto. So the last thing I want to talk about is color profiles. And this is going to really give a good look on whether you want to be in an outside landscape area or really just have people focus on your face or an interview, for example. And there's some great presets. Junaid, could you take us to the window where we can see all those presets?
Absolutely. So we are still in this screen where we see the menu settings on the camera, and this is actually located right below the auto white balance that we set up in the previous section. So you'll see that there's different picture styles, and right now we have the neutral picture style set up. There are many different ones. You can have an auto one.
If we go to the other menu, then I think we could see the actual names on there, and it might just give people some ideas of what that might look like. So on the top tab, there's the camera, and it's number 4. And then we go down to the bottom where it says picture style. Okay, let's jump into there. So let's look at these names just to give you an idea. So portrait is actually, it's on the top. Sometimes portrait, what it does here is it's going to try to bring more saturation in your skin tones, right? So it's
Right.
just going to try to make your skin look more vibrant and your hair look a little bit more pop. But I find that by the default, sometimes it looks too much like 90s MTV. I don't know.
Yeah, it
Have you had that
does.
experience? I really recommend going to neutral, but I also think that if you're not happy with how it looks, just play with these presets, find the one that looks the closest to what you like, and then tweak it just a little bit till it's exactly how you like it. And how does that work, Junaid, if we wanted to tweak some of these presets?
Yeah, so to tweak this setting, you would simply go to the one that you want to choose, click on Detail Settings, and then you can say, okay, I want to change the strength of the sharpness. So sharpness, strength, contrast, saturation, color tone. So you can say, hey,
And
I
that's
want
it.
the sharpness strength to be stronger. Click OK. Then contrast strength to be a little less contrasty. Saturation. I'm just willy-nilly trying this out. And when I go back to below, you could see the neutral change with 2 star star, -1, 1 and 1.
So pretty much that's all you need to know. If you want to look up the manual and look online, then it'll explain everything in full detail. But if you got through this video, then you will have touched all the settings that we dare go into and tweak. Any more than this, you're welcome to do it. But I think that what we covered is 100% of what you're going to need in the typical usage of this camera as a webcam, especially when it's being used with the Goboxstudio. The last thing I want to cover, and I teased this a little bit earlier, is about this concept called ND filters. Now, I don't have one with me right now, but what's going to happen is, Junaid, could you take us back to the shutter speed settings? The reason I'm bringing this up is shutter speed is something that's very unique look and feel. So the way I move my hand across the camera, you're going to see I have a very specific shutter speed, and it blurs just the right amount. So it looks similar to what a movie or a TV show would look like. However, when it's really bright, then what we showed you earlier is we can increase the shutter speed to make it the correct brightness so that it's not overexposed. But then we lose that effect. And what's going to happen is instead of looking like a movie, it's going to look like individual photos where you're going to see a freeze frame of my hand here, and then here, and then here. And it's very choppy looking. And people don't like that a lot of times. So in order to maintain the shutter speed at 1/60, then you bring in what's called an ND filter. You can buy this at B&H. You can buy it on Amazon, pretty much anywhere. And it's just a little filter that you screw onto your lens, and it's going to cut down the amount of light that comes in so that you don't have to increase the shutter speed. Instead, you adjust how much light comes in, and you do that physically instead of digitally altering the settings. And that's a more advanced solution.
So what you're saying is that the ND filter, which stands for neutral density filters, they're actually sunglasses for your cameras, for your lenses.
Dude, you said it so much better than I did. They're sunglasses. That's what they are. So that you don't have to squint your eyes.
Right. So you don't have to squint your eyes when it's too bright. We put on sunglasses, and when there's too much light going into the camera, you just need to give it some sunglasses. So
Yeah.
get some ND
That's
filters.
so, that's so true. Squinting your eyes would be the equivalent of increasing your f-stop, where it says
Yes,
f2.0. And literally, as the number goes up, this more squinty your aperture get.
that's right.
So yeah, that's a really good one. It's like sunglasses. So, guys, that's the end of this tutorial, and I hope you enjoyed this. And if you have any more questions, put them in the comments below. We're making more content like this every single week, and I'll see you in the next one.
See you next one. Thanks.